In the modern age today, there is an epidemic of loneliness in my generation because, again, I'm only 28 years old, but also the younger generation as well. That's frankly very disturbing to see. And I read an article quite recently about Gen Z being called the loneliest generation. And I was like, what does that mean, the loneliest generation? And in the article, it goes on to explain that like 73% of Gen Z respondents mentioned that they felt alone all the time, even with the age demographic being like 18 to 24 feeling that way the most. And I couldn't help but feel perplexed at that notion because of the great irony that surrounds our lives today. We have this technology. We have the world being more interconnected than ever before. We have social media that lets you stalk your friends whom you haven't seen in like 20 years or something, as an example, and even into other strangers' lives. We are so interconnected today, and yet we feel so alone at the same time. And that's very scary to me because I relate to that like a lot. And it's the ultimate irony in the world to be so interconnected through technology, the phone, social media, and yet you feel so alone and isolated in places all around the world. So, as an example to that, in major cities across the United States, with that same article, it mentioned that cities like Los Angeles, New York, Washington, D.C., Tennessee, like cities across the United States, had that problem more prevalently than rural areas did. But I can't help but feel that's pretty much like all over the place in the US and also all over the world as well. The most important thing to note is that if you're feeling that way, if you're feeling alone, no matter what age group you are, there is a solution to that problem. And I'll use myself as an example because I like personal anecdotes to kind of back up, what I'm saying. And take this all with a grain of salt. This is just my personal story, my personal experience, but if it helps you, that's the most important part. So I moved to Washington, D.C. about more than a year ago. And I moved from Maine. I'm not from there, but I was there for a job. Things didn't work out. And so I moved to a new location for a new job. That's typically how it goes for people my age with like the career. And so I was on cloud nine for the first couple of months. It was a new location, it was a chance to meet new people, learn new things, taste new foods, drink new drinks, as dumb as that sounds. And I'm gonna tell you this, when I moved to DC, that feeling went away very quickly because the Cloud Nine feeling quickly got replaced by feelings of anxiety and depression and frustration because I saw all these people around me, couples, families, etc., that had lived in DC far longer than I had at the time, literally like more than a couple of days to like a week or whatever. And I couldn't help but feel like there was something wrong with me. And over time, I retreated into myself and I ended up isolating myself subconsciously from just the world around me. It was confusing because I had moved to a new location for a new job. I was excited to meet new people and do new things, and then I ended up isolating myself as a result of these negative emotions that I just didn't know how to process. So after a couple of months, I was like, I gotta get out of the house. Like, I am depressed. Like, I'm working out constantly to counteract that effect with the endorphins. But, like, at the same time, I have to change something. So I went on Eventbrite and then I found my first embassy event. And I was like, what the hell is an embassy event? And it was an event at the embassy of Italy or Nicaragua or one of the 175 that's in the DC area. And I was like, that's pretty interesting. Let's give that a try, just to get out of the house at least. So I got out of the house, I went to my first embassy event, and I immediately fell in love with just the whole new world that was right in front of me. It reminded me of several months prior when I first moved to DC with that feeling of exploration and adventure that so many of us share. And I decided to go to do a deep dive into that world. So like after work, I was going to all of these embassy events, which was amazing. I was learning about these like different cultures and I was meeting new people and I was enthralled by this whole new world. And then I saw a problem. And the problem was that you couldn't find information about one or like all of the embassies, like in a centralized location. And I was like, there has to be a solution to that problem. And I did some market research because I'm a research personality type. And I quickly found out that there wasn't like one place where you could find like, oh, what's the embassy of Rwanda doing like in February or something like that. And so I decided to become that solution. I come from a entrepreneurial mindset, or at least I'm trying to be more that way in this like new year, 2024, and also 2023. That's when this all started, and I was reading these books and I was doing this research, and I was like, well, I could start a newsletter which summarizes which embassy events and cultural events are happening in the DC area, and at least like publish it to the DMV like public to help people like show off this like new world, because people here in the DC area, like they know the embassies exist, and some people take the events for granted, including myself. But also at the same time, a lot of people don't know that these embassy events, a lot of them are free, a lot of them are available to the general public, and all you have to do is just go to them, which is so cool. And you learn about a new culture and you meet new people. So I took a hobby that I developed an interest in. I saw a problem, and then I decided to become the solution through a lot of evergreen skills that I was developing over time. So, for example, social media marketing, writing a newsletter, which is communication, networking, when you go to these events and like start talking to people just out of the blue to get over your fear of talking to new people and making new friends. And so over time, and it's been about a year since the project I started has grown, and it's grown into a community, which astounded me. Because first of all, I thought I was the only one that was interested in that niche. And then second of all, I didn't think other people would be interested too, despite constantly publishing the information. So the end result is that a year later, there has been a community that has formed as a result of my interest in a hobby that I saw a problem in, and then determined to make a solution out of, which was pretty cool. So I challenge you to do the same thing. And it is a lot of work, which there is no doubt. I won't lie to you. There is a lot of work when it comes to trying to turn your hobby into a community of like-minded individuals. But the thing is that life is all about work. And if you don't put in the work, nothing is going to change. It's the same thing with your fitness goals for the new year. As an example, like a lot of people are like, I'm going to lose 25 pounds. And then they go to the gym for one day in January and they're like, it's too hard. I can't do that. It's the same type of mindset. So if you're feeling lost or you're feeling alone it doesn't even have to be a new city, a new country, a new city, a new location, there's a way to change that, but it requires a lot of perseverance and hard work and a lot of lonely nights on the weekends trying to make something out of a hobby. So the first step is to find something you're interested in. For me, it was embassy events here in DC, because DC is a very international city and I come from an international background. And I was like, okay, there has to be something there. Find a new hobby. Second, when you spend a lot of time absorbed in that hobby, like you're consuming podcasts, you're going to events, you're meeting people, you're talking to people, find a problem that you can solve personally. And the solution doesn't have to be complicated. Like for me, my project, Embassy Life in DC, the solution is literally doing a bunch of research into which events are happening, publishing a newsletter every week, and then also creating social media content for that. Now, I won't lie to you, I haven't figured out a way to make money from it, aside from a small Patreon that I constantly get $15 a month from, even less actually. So, you're not going to be a billionaire like all these financial gurus at the same time. But that's besides the point. The point is that you can build a community around an interest that you have and a problem that you solve. So the third thing is to solve that problem that you noticed through whatever skills you have at the time. So for example, if you're a great writer, start a newsletter. If you're great at posting stuff on Instagram, start posting stuff on Instagram about your hobby, do stories. If you're great at public speaking, start a podcast. There are so many things that you can do in order to build an audience of people in your area that share the same interest as you, and that's a way to solve loneliness. The fourth thing is to continue learning. So My project, for example, it's changed substantially since like a year ago. I'll give you an example. So when I first started, I never imagined that it would evolve beyond a newsletter. I thought the solution was the newsletter. And then I started writing the newsletter more and more. It's a weekly newsletter for those of you that are curious. And all it is just publishing events on a weekly basis. And so I thought that was all it was going to be. And then I've always had this innovative mindset where I'm constantly researching like new things, like for example, new AI tools that can add subtitles to videos, or new tools that I can use to automate a lot of the research that I do to save time, because we're all busy, right? And in an era where, you have so much information at your fingertips, you can literally find so much information. It's honestly overwhelming. So constantly iterate on your existing skill set, but don't be afraid to learn new skills at the same time. The post example to the example that I just gave about a year ago is that I started hosting more events on my own. Like we had a Christmas tree walking tour over December because of some idea that I had when I went to a run club that I'm part of here in DC. They had an embassy tree running tour. And I was like, wait a sec, it's Christmas time. I'm not flying back to see my family. Why not do the same thing? So I ended up doing a walking tour literally on Christmas Day, posted it last minute. Guess how many people we had? 6 people that showed up in total. 6 people for a last minute event and stuff like that. So that gave me the courage to start hosting events like more this year, which is one of the goals I have. And then about a week ago, I hosted my first coffee creator meetup here in DC for people with my community to like give me feedback on what works, what doesn't work, and then what more content they want to see in the future. So my point is this, is like, you have an existing skill set already. If you don't have any skills, then that's perfect. You learn as you go along. And disclaimer is that you're not going to make a ton of money, if at all, honestly. Like, it's been a year for me, and I get, tickets to some events that rarely happens, and I get $13 a month from Patreon, 13 to 15. So I'm not a millionaire, but I wish I was, but I'm not. So you're not going to make money, but that's besides the point. Like, I know a lot of financial gurus nowadays are always talking about like build your side hustle and like, quit your 9 to 5 and stuff like that. The real world doesn't work that way. You have to spend years with a side hustle to even get, unless you like hit the right trend at the right time and it's like, an AI software skill or whatever. Like, you're not going to make anything. But that's besides the point. The point is to stop feeling alone. And in these major cities like DC, it's very easy to get into a very depressed mind state where you literally are trapped in your house because you don't want to go outside. You're lonely as heck because it's like, oh my God, like, I can't even imagine like meeting people, and like, how do I even do that? Like, are people going to judge me? And like all these like thoughts that are in your head. Whereas all you need to do is find a hobby, start exploring that hobby more and more and more, find a problem within that hobby. It doesn't have to be a big one. It can be a small one that you just noticed. Come up with a solution as a third step to that problem that you notice in your hobby, again, using an existing skill set, or better yet, if you don't even have any skills, learn one. Learn a communication medium. Learn to write. Learn to write a newsletter. Learn to write a blog post. Hell, start a YouTube vlog. Something, just to get the word out and start building an audience. And then the best part is that you constantly iterate on your product or on your deliverables that you're putting out into the world. The 5th step is to eventually note down all the progress that you've made over the past whatever time span it is. For me, it's been a year, and I constantly think about like what I can improve, what doesn't work, and then what more topics I could explore in the future. So that's the framework, as basic as that sounds, to stop feeling alone in these new cities. But here's the crux. It requires a lot of work. And in this modern age, not a lot of people want to put in the work in order to change. Like, not a lot of people, for example, want to go to the gym because they're afraid of being judged, or they're just too lazy to put in the effort. Not a lot of people would choose to do what I'm doing right now, even if it has like limited success and you're only barely meeting a couple of new people. But the thing is that if you're not willing to put in the hard work, how are you going to change? I leave you with that question.